Good evening, and the time is 7:01. We will call the November 27, 2023 Oak Park Board of Education regular meeting to order. Ms. Greer, please call the roll.
Clark.
Here.
Corcoran.
Here.
Davis.
Here.
Elvin.
Here.
Hoda. Madison. Smith.
Here. Okay, item 2, recitation of district mission and vision. Trustee Clark.
Our mission is to create an inclusive learning community that provides the best academic and social experience by educating the whole child, one child at a time. Our vision is cultivating visionary leaders and compassionate citizens engaged in the global community.
Thank you very much. For item 2, approval of the agenda was shared prior to today's meeting. Without objection, we'll pass a motion to approve the agenda by unanimous consent. Is there an objection to doing so? Hearing none, the agenda is hereby approved. We'll go to item number 4, which is approval of the consent agenda. It has 2 items on there: approval of minutes from November 13th, as well as approval of personnel action from November 27, 2023. Without objection, we'll pass a motion to approve the consent agenda by unanimous consent. Is there an objection to doing so? Hearing none, the consent agenda is hereby approved. We will now go to item 5, which is the audit results report, and Mr. Michael Roca from Yo and Yo is here to speak with us. So, welcome, Mr. Roca, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. You guys hear me fine?
Yes.
Okay. Well, first of all, good evening, and thank you for having me here. Again, my name is Mike Rolka with Yo and Yo CPAs. I'm a senior manager, and I've been working with the district now for the past several years. Am I doing that?
Get a little feedback.
You good? All right. I can probably speak loudly enough anyway. So I have a brief presentation. We'll hit a little bit on the numbers, but mostly on what the opinion is, as well as the findings of the audit. One thing I'd like to stress before we even start, remember, every number and everything we talk about here is for fiscal year 2023. So that's July 1, 2022 through June 30, 2023. So any of these numbers we report on right now could be wildly different based on your revenues, expenses, and other activities of the district. So firstly, what is an audit and what is the purpose of an audit? Well, the purpose of an audit is to obtain reasonable assurance that the financial statements are materially correct. And that's a key concept to understand, is materially correct. That means there could be errors, they could be trivial, they could have gone undetected, but the numbers are materially correct. Think of the probably tens of thousands of transactions that happen throughout the course of the year. There's no possible way during the course of an audit we could look at every single one of them. So it's on a sampling and test basis to look at the big items and make sure those are correct. An audit is not designed to find fraud. It may uncover fraud, but most often when fraud is discovered, that's discovered by somebody within the organization and some sort of a whistleblower type situation happens. I think the statistics say auditors find fraud less than 5% of the time when it's discovered. So the bottom line of the audit is that we have issued an unmodified opinion on the financial statements. And what that means is that the financial statements are free of material errors and they can be relied upon by outside parties. So what is management's responsibility with the financial statements? Management's responsibility is the fair presentation in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, as well as the design and implementation of a set of internal controls that would prevent, detect, or correct errors, whether it's due to fraud or just a clerical error, in a timely manner. Our responsibility as auditors is to gain an understanding of the internal controls, perform our risk assessment, and then develop procedures in order to audit the financial statements. So as a part of that, we do look at the internal controls, but we don't give an opinion on the internal controls. Next, I'd like to just look briefly at the snapshot of what the balance sheet looks like. And again, I just want to stress that this is as of June 30, 2023. So these numbers are surely different by now. A couple of key things I'd like to point out here. Right in the center, you see the Bonds Capital Project Fund was sitting at about $20 million in cash. And if you recall, that's because there was a bond issuance during the year of just over $15 million, and then the other $5 million was just leftover funds that have not yet been spent from the prior bond. General fund cash is nearly $15 million, so a very healthy cash position. And then there's a big balance in due from other governmental units, which is primarily made up of state aid receivables. The rest of it is mostly federal or from the ISD. Down in the liability sections, the accounts payable pretty well represents your usual standard payables that you would have every single month. And then there's some accrued expenditures and salaries related to essentially the summer pay accruals for the teacher contracts and retirement benefits. At the bottom, you'll see $1.6 million of deferred inflows of resources, and what that represents is grant draws that weren't done in a timely manner. So the grant revenue was not received within the 60-day availability requirement, so that revenue gets pushed into the next fiscal year. So you'll see that in 2024 as revenue. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing to have deferred inflows of resources. It just moves where the revenue may be recognized. So it is still a receivable recorded on the books at the end of June. This is the bottom section of the balance sheet, which is the fund balance section, and that is the classifications of how the fund balance is made up. You see the general fund has about $400,000 of prepaid expenditures that are classified as non-spendable, and that's because you've already spent that money and you're just waiting to utilize those prepaids. The rest of it is unassigned and may be used as the district pleases for general operations. The bonds capital project fund there is fully restricted based on the bonds that were issued and must be spent on those specific projects. And then in the non-major funds, there's some additional capital project restrictions, debt service restrictions that must be used to pay down debt. And then there's also $193,000 of food service. And though that's a small number compared to everything else we're looking at, I do want to point that out because over the past several years, that number has been considered too large for the compliance requirements. And this year, finally, it's back within the guidelines issued by MDE and the federal government. So that number going down to $193,000 is a good thing, and it was intentionally done. Here we have a brief snapshot of the revenues and expenses and changes in fund balances. Just quickly look at these. You'll see that the general fund brought in about $62 million and spent about $64, so use some of the fund balance ending at $15.2 million. Once again, the bond fund had significant revenues this year over expenses, leading the fund balance to $18 million that surely will be used over the next couple of years on projects, and then the restricted funds on the right there. More on the fund balance to come. Here we look at the budgetary comparison, and it's some pretty big numbers, right? The original budget, we started out with revenues of about $54 million and expenditures nearly $57 million. There were amendments done throughout the year to bring the final revenue budget to $63.6 million and the expenditures to $65.3 million. And you'll see what actually happened was $62 million in revenues and $64 million in expenses. So for the total of revenues and expenses, the district was under expense and under revenue, and you'll see that the revenues were just about 97% accurate and the expenditures were 98% accurate. Now, as we get into the findings a little bit later, you will see there is a budgetary finding because the way that the budget's legal level of control is not at the total level, it's at the functional level. So there was a budget overage based on some of the year-end accruals. But we'll get there in a minute. This chart shows how your fund balance as a percentage of expenditures has trended over the past 5 years, and also gives you a comparison to the state as a whole and your peer group. So based on pupil count, your peers, you're in the 3,500 to just about 4,000 pupil range, and the average fund balance as a percentage of expenditures based on the most recently completely published data was 19.71%. Now for 2022, 2023, the district ended at 23.9%. So actually a better ratio than everyone in your peer group and everybody in the state as a whole. Now that's not to say that there's not some that have higher fund balances as a percentage of expenses, but where the district sits is a very comfortable and healthy fund balance. We have some findings and areas of improvement to discuss. Two of them are material weaknesses, and one I briefly mentioned earlier, which was the budget overages, so the expenditures in excess of appropriations. And so what that was is one line item in the budget was over budget by about $2.3 million due to a year-end accrual. And so that triggers the material weakness and compliance finding as it relates to the budget. And the way to correct that really is to anticipate those year-end accruals, make them timely, and amend the budget beforehand. Of course, your budget must be amended before June 30. So sometimes that does become tricky when there might be some expenses you're not aware of until maybe a month after year-end, and you could run into a little bit of trouble from a budgetary perspective. The next material weakness was related to audit adjustments, which really stemmed fully from a lack of timely reconciliation. So the bank reconciliations were very far behind throughout the course of the year. Those need to be done on a monthly basis. That's one of the best controls you can have to ensure that, you know, if there is a fraud, it is uncovered quickly and can be responded to. But also, it's not just about the cash reconciliations. There's other things that should be reconciled monthly, quarterly, or annually, dependent on what level of transactions there might be. A lot of things you would just reconcile at the end of the year for audit preparation to bring the financial statements in accordance with GAAP, but those should be done timely within a reasonable amount of time after year end. Usually 60 to 90 days would be considered timely. But the bank reconciliations we would consider timely if they're done within 6 weeks after the period. So for example, if you are preparing the April 30th bank reconciliation, having that complete by June 15th would be ideal. So again, just a more thorough review of the year-end account balances and cleanup and reconciliation in a timely manner. So what that resulted in, though, was we had a number of audit adjustments from the cash reconciliations, the unfunded accrued actuarial liability. That was a pretty big, about $2 million adjustment, and $2 million adjustments to federal grant revenues and expenses that were not reconciled throughout the year. That resulted in a new trial balance being provided on October 11th, and thus kind of making a crunch window of the time to get that audit completed in a timely manner, but we did make it ultimately. We did report one significant deficiency that was alluded to earlier, the lack of timely requests for federal grant reimbursement. I recommend that the district make a policy or sets a procedure about how often should the grant draws be made. So let's pick on the special education grant as an example. Maybe you want to make those grant requests monthly, or maybe you want to make it quarterly. It really is up to you, but they should be done kind of using a system throughout the year rather than just waiting till the end of the year to make a full draw. Now, when you have a reasonable amount of cash on hand, it's less important. So, you know, we talked about how there was about $15 million and you have a healthy cash balance. Now imagine, you know, if you're a district and you're sitting on maybe $1 million, getting that grant reimbursement timely is much more important. So, something to consider. Lastly, we did do the single audit this year, which is the compliance audit on federal funding. That's required anytime you spend more than $750,000 federal funds in a single year. The school district will always have a single audit due to the immense amounts of federal funds that come through school districts. This year we were required to audit the Education Stabilization Fund, also known as ESSER, the Child Nutrition Cluster, so that's all your food service funding, and the Special Education Cluster. For each of those, we've issued an unmodified opinion on compliance, so essentially an A+ on how those funds were spent. They were spent in accordance to the federal regulations. As it relates to federal funding and federal expenses, we identified no material weaknesses and no significant deficiencies. Before I close, there's a few things that I'd like to point out that are in the letter that's attached with the financial statements. A couple of accounting standards happened and are upcoming. One that was adopted this year was GASB Statement 96, which is related to software subscription liabilities. There was no impact to the financial statements for Oak Park schools based on that standard, but had there been, it would have been adopted. Other upcoming statements, GASB Statement 100 is applicable for fiscal year '24, and that prescribes how new accounting standards should be adopted and error corrections should be disclosed. That's more of an auditor's standard, in my opinion, than really the district standard, because it's, if there's a new standard, how should we disclose it, or if there's an error to correct, what needs to be disclosed. It streamlines that process. GASB Statement 101 is a new model for reporting compensated absences, so paid days off, accumulated sick leave, that sort of thing. And so that will have an impact on the district, but it's not applicable until June 30, 25. So it's about a year and a half away from now. But generally, for most districts, that's going to increase the liability because they've clarified certain salary-related expenses that also need to be included with that, so such as recording certain fringe benefits that go along with those salaries. We also looked at some of the significant estimates that are made in the financial statements in order to produce the financial statements. Saying significant estimates sometimes scares people, but it's impossible to create a set of financial statements without significant estimates. So the most significant estimates, were the useful lives of capital assets. So when you purchase a capital asset, do you assign 20 years or do you assign 50 years for it to be depreciated? So there's a wide range there, and always going to be an estimate of how long that asset will be used, and that affects the annual depreciation. We look over those items and we identified no issues with the assumed years. The other two, the big two there with the big liabilities out there, the net pension liability and the net OPEB liability, those estimates are based on the actuarial valuations, and it takes a multitude of things. We look at those for reasonableness. So it takes a discount rate that, if you switch that discount rate +1 or -1%, it'll change the liability by millions of dollars. So every district in the state uses the same discount rate and the same assumptions, and everything appears reasonable. With that, I'd like to especially thank Dr. Ferris for helping us get this one through. I know she pulled some long nights to make sure we get it done on time, as did my team. And thank you, Angel, for your work along the way, too. Really appreciate it. I'll take any questions.
Questions for Mr. Rover?
Yeah, I have one question. The question that I had is, the athletic revenue, where does that fall? Like, as far as the...
Like the gate receipts, that kind of thing?
Yes.
That would be in the general fund.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
Mr. Davis?
You recommended for the significant deficiency, a policy to be drawn. What are some of the, do you have recommendations for that? Or what do other school districts?
How often to request grant? If I were in the finance director position, I would probably make it a monthly thing, or maybe quarterly. I think it really depends on the grant and how quickly you need the cash flows from it. So if you compare the different grants, let's say you have one grant that's a $50,000 grant, well, maybe you don't want to request that one monthly.
Right.
But you have another grant that's a $4 million grant, probably should make more grant requests rather than requesting it all at once. So it would be, in my opinion, case by case on each grant, but I wouldn't do it any less than quarterly, no matter what type of grant.
Okay, thank you.
No problem, you're welcome.
Trustee Boyd?
And just to be clear, when you use the word policy there, are you talking about board policy or like accounting?
A working
finance
internal policy,
department
correct.
Procedure?
Yes, procedure may be a better term there.
Any other questions, Mr. Roper? So, you mentioned that, when you said policy, I was thinking board policy, so I'm trying to make sure, to that point, that it shouldn't be a board policy. And I only say that because it's tough for us to police if it's just an internal procedure.
Sure. So you may make it a board policy. I'm sure there are board policies governing grants, but I wouldn't think that your cash management policy, as it currently sits, specifies how often to make those draws. So,
Trustee Hood?
So the board policy would say something like, the administration will ensure that that everything is aligned with grant requirements and general accounting principles.
yes.
And that would be the board policy. And then the administrative guideline or the procedure within the department would be doing it, accomplishing that policy by doing it in this way.
Yeah, we need to make sure we wordsmith that correctly. Because
Yeah.
just from your example, like, I don't know that there's anything that says you can't do it the way we did it, like, from a gap standpoint.
Correct. That is correct.
Right,
It's
so-
just kind of not the best practice that you want to follow.
Got you.
Yeah.
So that's why, we need to probably wordsmith that, if we're gonna do it. I get that we get more specific down to, the policy that would be set internally, but how do we wanna manage that on our end? Report, Trustee Hart?
Yeah, I'm just looking at our policy. So in 5003, what it says is, the superintendent will promulgate legally compliant administrative regulations concerning expenditures of funds received through federal grants and awards.
I don't think this was, I think this was that. I think it was legally compliant. It was just
Yeah.
not the best way to handle it. So that's why I'm saying, like, if we want to do something, we really have to wordsmith it right. 'Cause I don't
Right.
think this was wrong, it's just not best practice.
Exactly.
And so that would be at least my thoughts on it. How much more do we end up paying you because we weren't timely on our reconciliations
yeah.
and because we were not prepared?
I do not have the exact number. I can get that for you, but I do think it was approximately double.
Which was, I think when we talked before, I was somewhere in the neighborhood of about $30-something thousand.
I think so.
Yeah, extra,
Yes.
yeah. Any other questions for Mr. Roper?
Thank you for your hard work.
Yeah, I
Thank you.
found
Thank you.
another 5001. Board of Education poll, in furtherance of this responsibility, the board directs the superintendent to establish financial procedures to ensure the proper and effective accounting of all school district monies. The monies are administered in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles, and that all legal requirements concerning school district monies are satisfied in letter and spirit. Under the supervision of the superintendent, financial reports and statements will be prepared and submitted to the board on a monthly basis, etc. So it does address generally accepted accounting principles and proper and effective accounting.
I'm sorry, can you finish reading the et cetera? It was only just.
Et cetera might not have spoke to the issue, but go ahead.
Financial
board on
reports
a
and
monthly
statements will be
basis.
prepared and submitted to the board on a monthly basis or more frequently if requested by the board. So that speaks to the annual, to the financial statements that we receive every month. But in terms of this specific issue about how accounting is done, that's kind of the middle of that policy.
It sounds like, really what it sounds like is just gonna have to be something from an internal standpoint that you guys are gonna have to establish.
And we've had discussions, the 6-week and the quarterly, we've had, we've had those meetings already along with Michael about what's good accounting practices and drawdowns.
I assume then that we have, this is a question more for you, Angel, I assume then that we have, understanding these material weaknesses and significant deficiencies.
Yeah, we had to provide a plan.
Yep.
It wasn't just, identify, okay, we get it, but we actually devised a plan.
Corrective
And we,
action.
corrective action plan, we submitted it to,
You're good with the cap?
So I will say we
Caps.
specifically don't opine on those, but I believe the plan that's put in place is appropriate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Caps, what else?
Corrective action plan, yep.
Yeah,
One
I
for
know
each
what they are,
finding.
I
Yeah.
just,
One for each finding,
thank you, that's
correct.
what I thought.
Yeah,
Okay,
correct.
Any other questions then? Thank you, Mr. Rocco, much
Thank you.
appreciated.
Thank you all.
Thank you
Safe
for the hard
safe
work.
travels on the roads.
Yeah,
Thank
you
you.
too.
Thank you to the team as well, I know they put in extra hours on it, so thanks
Yeah,
for that.
yes, thank you. I'll pass that along. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night.
All right, we have no reports, so we'll go to public participation. We come to the part of the meeting where the public has an opportunity to address the full board if it so desires. Public participation is one-way communication in which members of the public are asked to address the full board with the understanding that board members will not be able to respond. Trustee Davis, would you please read the public comment guidelines?
Because the Oak Park Board of Education values public meetings, not just meetings in public, we welcome public comment on school issues. Speakers are asked to express themselves in a civil manner with due process for the dignity and privacy of others who may be affected by public comments. The public comment portion of the meeting cannot be used to make personal attacks against a school board member or school district employee that disrupts the order of the meeting and are totally unrelated to the manner in which the member or employee performs his or her duties. Speakers should be aware that if statements violate the rights of others under the law of defamation or invasion of privacy, such comments may result in legal liability. Most comments can be concisely stated in 3 minutes, and the board respectfully asks that comments remain focused on the topic or issue and not be directed at specific personnel or board members. I do not have any forms for public comment.
Are there members of the public who want to address the board? Going once, going twice. Gone, there are no members of the public in the room. I just wanted to state that for those who can't see it. And so we will go then to our action item. We have one of those this evening, approval of high school interior painting bid. Trustee Smith.
Okay. Resolved that the Oak Park Board of Education approves the administration recommendation for the purchase of high school interior painting as follows. The base bid to be awarded to KV Painting of Rochester Hills, Michigan, in the amount of $135,844. The auditorium to RNC Paint Systems of Troy, Michigan, in the amount of $20,718. And the cafeteria to Axtel Services of Wixom, Michigan, in the amount of $2,425. The total for all 3 painting projects is $158,987, which will be paid through the Oak Park School Sinking Fund.
Motion made, is there a second?
Second.
Motion made by trustee Smith, seconded by trustee Corcoran. Mr. Hueda.
What's the time frame for this job being done?
Well, we're hoping to have it done by school starting next year. So we're going to use the evenings, over the Christmas break, the holiday break. We're going to be doing it then. So we're going to be doing the cafeteria and the auditorium will start over the holiday break. So, but we'll be in the evenings, after hours, doing the hallways and the classrooms and such.
At the risk of putting my foot in my mouth, this is high school, and we're talking about the cafeteria. Didn't it seemed like it just got?
It did.
It's
It's a small amount,
The nicest
but
painting part of the building.
yeah, it's actually just going to be touch-up. It's going to, there's certain parts of it that are kind of messed up, so we're going to just free that up and clean it up. Trying to bring it up to the same level as everything else.
Got it. Any other questions? Ms. Griffiths, call the roll.
Clark,
Yes.
Corcoran,
Yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Elvin,
Yes.
Hoda,
Yes.
and Smith.
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes. We will go to item 9A on information items. Approval of high school and Oak Park Preparatory asbestos abatement project. Mr. Phillips.
As we prepare for the 2021 bond work that's going to be happening at the OPA and the remaining portions of the high school, we have to make sure that there's no asbestos that can be spread throughout the air. So we have to have it abated. And we had a company come through, Nova Environmental. They identified where the asbestos was, and they helped us solicit bids for the abatement of those, and that's what we're looking at today.
Okay. Any questions on that? All right, and now we'll go to item 9B, on-call HVAC service.
This is, the HVAC services has been something that we've been doing, working with another company for the last few years. We felt it prudent to bid this service out, put it on record, what we're paying per hour for these companies. And we wanted to go through an official bid for the district for those services.
All right.
These services will be boiler maintenance, HVAC work, etc.
Thank you. Any questions from Mr. Phillips on that? And now we'll go to item 9C, superintendent evaluation meeting date. As I noted at the last meeting, we were tentatively scheduled to have a meeting on December 11th, just before our regular meeting. I thought that would not give us enough time to really go through it, and I want to make sure that we're not rushed in doing so. So I asked for some additional dates. So please get out your calendars and let me know if one. I'll start with the first one, December 7th.
December 7th?
7th.
That won't work for me.
December 7th does not work. December 13th. Six o'clock.
I have foot surgery on the 13th. I'll be out the rest of the month for the most part.
You gonna be out the rest of the month?
For the most part.
There's December 19th and 20th, but if you.
Yeah, I mean, that's just me though.
Okay,
so.
all right. Does anybody else have a conflict on 13th?
Yeah, I do.
You have a conflict on 13th as well? 19th or 20th?
That's very close to Christmas, but okay.
That's where we landed, so I don't know what to say. There's 4 different dates, so we need to choose one of those.
Yeah, I think we need to go backwards again.
The 13th.
Yep.
Will that
Oh, wait,
allow,
wait, the
that,
one before the 13th, so.
the 7th was the other one. You can't do any of the 4? 7, 13, 19, 20.
I can't do that either. I might
I'll
come
have to
on the
make the 7th
19th.
work.
You'll give it a valiant effort to make the 7th work? Okay. 7?
No,
You can't make the 7th.
no, we were discussing
okay.
like the 19th.
Can we do the 7th?
I can't do the 7th.
But you weren't trying to be able to do nothing
No.
else anyway, right?
I could have tried the 19th or 20th, but go ahead.
After
without-
your surgery.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna roll with the 7th.
Okay.
All right, 7th at 6 p.m.
So the 11th,
We still got a meeting on the 11th,
Right.
but it's a regular meeting.
so you were saying the 7th?
Yes. Yeah. So we'll have a meeting before the meeting.
We still doing that?
No, my
Oh.
point is it's on the 7th, is the meeting that will take place before our regular meeting of the
Oh,
11th.
special.
okay.
Yeah, it'll be a special meeting. I'll send a meeting notice, apparently, even though I send these, they're not on my calendar, I don't know why that is. But if I can get them on yours, all the better. So, I will send a meeting notice. Mr. Abdullah had any issues there?
Nope, I
Okay.
can make it work.
Okay. All right, you good? As good as can be? Okay. Sorry, I'm doing it.
Almost like Angel doesn't want me in this.
It wasn't his fault, that
I suggested the 11th, but if that
This is
doesn't
why I
work.
agreed. We tried. Okay, we are on item 10, communications, any communications from members of the administration?
Was that 7 PM on the 7th?
6 p.m.
6 PM.
And I'll send him a note right now. Any communications from members of the administration? From members of the board? No communications. We have a rather silent crowd tonight. All right, any addenda? Okay. Next meeting?
The next meeting.
The regular
The
scheduled
next,
meeting?
the next regular meeting of the Board of Education will be held on Monday, December 11th, 2023 at 7 PM in the boardroom at the Administration Building.
Okay. Email sent. If nothing else, without objection, we'll pass a motion to adjourn the meeting by unanimous consent. Is there an objection to doing so? All right, we're hereby adjourned at 7:37. Thank you.
Wow.